Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the stars drift past the main window. The ship had been traveling through empty space for 3 weeks now, searching for new planets and life forms. It was quiet work, the kind that made some crew members go crazy from boredom. But Jake liked the peace. After 20 years in the military, quiet was a good thing. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Sam Kelly from the communications station. His voice was tight with worry. "It's not like anything I've heard before." Jake walked over to Sam's station. The young officer had been working communications for 5 years, and he knew the difference between normal space chatter and something important. "What kind of signal?" "It's weak, sir. Very weak. But it's definitely artificial. Someone is trying to send a message." Sam pressed some buttons on his control panel. "The problem is, it's not in any language our computers know." Dr. Lisa Parker looked up from her science station. She was the ship's expert on alien languages, a job that usually meant sitting around doing nothing since they rarely met new alien races. "May I hear it, Captain?" Jake nodded. "Put it on speakers, Sam." The bridge filled with a strange sound. It was definitely a voice, but not human. The words were liquid, flowing like water. But there was something else in the voice, fear. Without understanding the words, everyone on the bridge could hear the terror. "How long has this been broadcasting?" Jake asked. "Computer says about 6 hours, sir. But the signal is getting weaker. Whatever is sending this, it's either moving away from us or running out of power." Lisa was already working at her station, running the signal through every translation program the ship had. "Captain, this is incredible.
I have a language structure.
It's completely new, but there are mathematical patterns I can work with. Give me an hour." Jake looked at his watch. They were supposed to continue their mission, mapping this sector of space, but something about the fear in that alien voice made him change his mind. Sam plotted a course toward the signal, best speed. "Yes, sir." The next hour passed slowly. Lisa worked at her station, muttering to herself as she tried to decode the message. The rest of the crew went about their duties, but everyone kept glancing at the speakers, hoping to hear more of the transmission. Finally, Lisa stood up. Her face was pale. "Captain, I need to speak with you privately." Jake followed her to his ready room. Lisa sat down heavily and rubbed her eyes. "Sir, I've managed to translate part of the message. It's a distress call. That much I figured." "Out. What else?" "They're asking for help. Specifically, they're asking for help from humans. They call us the Warriors of Terra. Captain, somehow these aliens know about us, and they think we're their only hope." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Humans had only been exploring this part of space for 30 years. Most alien races they'd met had never heard of Earth. What kind of help do they need? Lisa looked at her notes. "Their planet is under attack. Something called the Vex Collective is destroying their world." The alien speaking. "I think it's some kind of leader or ambassador. They're offering everything they have in exchange for our help." "Everything." "Their technology, their resources, their entire civilization. Captain, they're desperate. The message keeps repeating that they have maybe 3 weeks before their entire race is extinct." Jake stared out the window of his ready room. In the distance, stars burned quietly in the darkness. Somewhere out there, an entire race was dying, and they had asked humans for help. Did they say anything else about this Vex Collective? Not much. But what they did say, Lisa paused. "Captain, they're not just killing these people. They're doing something worse." The translator isn't perfect, but the word keeps coming up. "Torture, on a planetary scale." Jake felt anger begin to build in his chest. He had seen war before, had fought in battles where good people died. But this was different. This was an entire race crying out for help, with nowhere else to turn. "Lisa, I want you to clean up that translation and send it to Earth Command. Everything you've got." "Yes, sir." Jake walked back to the bridge. "Sam, open a channel to Earth. Command, Priority 1. It took 20 minutes for the signal to reach Earth, and for Admiral Susan Carter to respond. Her face appeared on the main screen, serious and alert. "Captain Morrison, what's your situation?" "Admiral, we've intercepted a distress call from an unknown alien species. Dr. Parker has translated it. They're asking specifically for human help against something called the Vex Collective." Admiral Carter's expression didn't change, but Jake could see her thinking. "Send me everything you have, Captain. I'll review it with the command staff." The transmission ended, and Jake was left staring at the empty screen. He thought about the fear in that alien voice, about an entire race facing extinction. He had joined the military to protect people, to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. It shouldn't matter if those people were human or not. 3 hours later, Admiral Carter called back. This time, she wasn't alone. General Kevin Brooks appeared on screen beside her, along with several other high-ranking officers Jake didn't recognize. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Carter began, "we've reviewed the translation. The situation is ... disturbing. General Brooks has some questions." General Brooks leaned forward. "Captain, in your opinion, is this message genuine?" "Yes, sir." "Dr. Parker is the best linguist in the fleet. She says they're asking for help. They're asking for help. And you believe they're facing extinction?" Jake thought about the terror in that alien voice. "Yes, sir, I do." The general nodded slowly. "Thank you, Captain. Maintain your current course and keep monitoring for more transmissions. We'll be in touch." The screen went dark again. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. It all heard the conversation, all understood what was happening. Somewhere in space, people were dying, and Earth was deciding whether to help. Sam spoke quietly from his station. "The signal is getting stronger. We're definitely getting closer to the source." "Good. Keep monitoring." "And Sam?" "Yes." "Sir, if they send another message, I want to hear it immediately." Jake stood at the center of his bridge, watching the stars. In a few days, they would reach the source of the signal. He didn't know what they would find there, but he had a feeling that everything was about to change. Admiral Paul Hendricks was eating lunch when the call came in. His aide rushed into the dining room with a face as white as paper. "Sir, you need to see this, right now." Paul put down his sandwich and followed the young officer to the command center. The entire staff was gathered around the main screen, watching something that made even the toughest soldiers look sick. "What am I looking at?" Paul asked. Colonel Ryan Hughes stepped forward. "Sir, this is footage from Captain Morrison's advanced scout team. They reached the alien system 2 days ago." The screen showed a planet covered in blue oceans and green islands. It should have been beautiful, but the space around it was filled with massive black ships. The ships were huge, bigger than anything humans had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, like a swarm of metal insects. "Those are Vex ships," Ryan continued. Sir." "That's not the worst part." The image changed, showing the surface of one of the planet's islands, and Paul watched in horror as mechanical soldiers herded groups of aliens toward large metal buildings. The aliens looked like they belonged in the ocean, with smooth blue skin and large eyes. They moved slowly on land, and the machines were forcing them along with electric weapons. "The aliens call themselves Kaleri," Ryan said. "They're peaceful. They've never fought a war in their entire history. The Vex are." ... double quotes. He paused, searching for words. "Sir, they're not just killing them." The image showed the inside of one of the metal buildings. Kalari were strapped to tables while machines worked on them. The aliens were still alive, still conscious, but something was being taken from their heads. Thin cables ran from their skulls to glowing containers. "What are we looking at?" Paul asked, though he was afraid he already knew. Dr. Emma Rodriguez stepped up to the screen. She was Earth's leading expert on artificial intelligence, and she had been studying the Vex technology for the past day. "Admiral, they're harvesting consciousness. They're stealing the minds of living beings and using them to power their own systems." Paul felt his stomach turn. He had seen terrible things in 30 years of military service, but this was beyond anything he could imagine. "How many Kalari are left?" "Our best estimate is about 2 million. But at the rate the Vex are working, Ryan checked his notes. They'll all be dead, or worse, within 3 weeks. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. An entire race was being slowly tortured to death, and they had asked humans for help. Paul's communicator buzzed. Admiral, this is President Amanda Foster. I need to speak with you immediately. The main screen changed to show the president sitting in the Oval Office. Her usually calm face was hard with anger. Admiral, I've seen the footage. How fast can we get our fleet to that system? Madame President, with our fastest ships, we're looking at 2 weeks minimum. But ma'am, we're talking about fighting an enemy we know nothing about. Those ships are massive. Could be sending our people to die. President Foster leaned forward. Admiral, I've been on the phone with every military leader on Earth and in the colonies. I've spoken with the heads of every major corporation and the governors of every human settlement. Do you know what they all said? No, ma'am. They all said the same thing. We don't abandon people who ask for our help. Not ever. The president's voice was steady, but Paul could hear the steel underneath. I'm authorizing the activation of Protocol Omega. Paul felt his blood go cold. Protocol Omega was humanity's most secret military plan. It had never been used, not even during the colonial wars. Ma'am, are you sure? That protocol will mobilize every military unit we have. Every unit, Admiral. Military, corporate security, colonial militias, even the mining companies with armed ships. I want everything we have moving toward that system within 6 hours. The screen went dark, leaving Paul staring at his reflection. Protocol Omega meant total war. It meant humanity would throw everything it had at an enemy until one side was completely destroyed. Sir Ryan was standing beside him. What are your orders? Paul looked around the room at his staff. These were good people, soldiers who had dedicated their lives to protecting others. Send out the activation codes, all fleets, all units. And Ryan? Yes, sir? I want you to personally lead a strike team to that system. Get there ahead of the main fleet and gather intelligence. But Ryan, if you see an opportunity to help those aliens, you take it. Don't wait for orders. Ryan saluted. Understood, sir? Over the next 6 hours, something unprecedented happened across human space. Ships that had been patrolling trade routes suddenly changed course. Corporate security forces loaded their weapons and prepared for combat. Colonial militias that usually spent their time chasing pirates began organizing for interstellar war. Dr. Rodriguez worked frantically with her team, trying to understand Vex technology from the limited data they had. Admiral, I think I know why they're harvesting consciousness. They're trying to become more than just machines. They want to experience emotions, creativity, all the things that make biological life special. And they're willing to torture entire civilizations to get it? It appears so. But sir, this might also be their weakness. If they're dependent on stolen consciousness to function, we might be able to find a way to disrupt that. Admiral Hendricks walked to the window of his office and looked out at the harbor. Ships were launching continuously now, their engines lighting up the night sky. The largest human fleet in history was assembling, all because a race of peaceful aliens had asked for help. His aide approached with a datapad. Sir, the fleet manifests. We have over 3,000 ships mobilizing. Everything from battle cruisers to cargo haulers with weapons strapped on. Paul took the pad and scrolled through the numbers. It was incredible. Humans from every corner of space were dropping everything to help aliens they had never met. Sir, we're also receiving volunteers from civilian ships, freighter captains, passenger liner crews. Even some of the deep space miners want to join the fleet. Paul nodded. Except any ship that can make the journey and carry weapons. This isn't about military protocol anymore. This is about showing the universe what humans do when innocent people are in danger. Captain Steve Morgan appeared on the communication screen, was the best fighter pilot in the fleet, and he would be leading the first wave of attacks. My squadron is ready to launch. We'll reach the Kalari system 12 hours ahead of the main fleet. Steve, I need you to understand something. We don't know what we're flying into. Those Vex ships are bigger than anything we've ever faced. Steve's face was grim but determined. Sir, I've seen the footage. What they're doing to those aliens. It's not going to continue. Not while humans can do something about it. Paul felt a surge of pride. This was why he had served for 30 years, why he had dedicated his life to the military. It wasn't for glory or conquest. It was for moments like this when good people stood up against evil. All units, this is Admiral Hendricks, he announced over the fleet-wide communication system.
In 2 weeks, we will reach the Kolari system.
We will face an enemy that has no mercy, no honor, and no limits. But they've made one critical mistake.
Paused, looking out at the ships preparing to launch. They've given us a reason to show them what total war really means. Captain Steve Morgan gripped the controls of his fighter as the Kolari system came into view. Behind him, 47 other human pilots followed in tight formation. They were the advance force, sent ahead to scout the enemy before the main fleet. Arrived, holy hell, whispered Lieutenant Amy Watson over the radio. Look at the size of those things. Steve looked through his cockpit window and felt his breath catch. The Vex ships surrounding the Kolari homeworld were massive beyond imagination. Each one was easily 10 times larger than humanity's biggest battleships. They hung in space like black mountains, their surfaces covered in strange lights that pulsed like heartbeats. Stay calm, people, Steve said into his radio. Remember, we're here to gather information first. Don't engage unless they attack us. But as they got closer to the planet, something made Steve's blood run cold. Sound was coming through there. Radio systems. Not engine noise or communication chatter. Screaming. The Vex ships were broadcasting the sounds of dying Kolari across all frequencies. Turn off the external audio, Steve ordered, but it was too late. Every pilot in the squadron had heard it. The raw terror and pain in those alien voices cut through them like knives. Lieutenant. Tom Bradley's voice came through the radio, shaking with rage. Captain, are they really broadcasting torture sounds as psychological warfare? Looks that way. Steve replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Stay focused on the mission. They flew closer to the planet, using their ship's stealth systems to avoid detection. What they saw below made even hardened combat veterans feel sick. The beautiful blue oceans of the Kolari world were now dark with pollution. The green islands were covered in metal structures that looked like factories. Captain, I'm picking up life signs from those buildings, said Amy. Thousands of them. But sir, the readings are ... wrong. They're weak, like the life forms are barely alive. Steve checked his own sensors. Amy was right. The buildings were full of living beings, but their vital signs showed massive stress and trauma. Can you get a visual on what's happening down there? Amy switched her ship's cameras to maximum zoom. The image that appeared on their screens made everyone fall silent. Kolari aliens were lined up in long rows, walking slowly toward massive processing centers. The ones coming out the other side weren't walking at all. They were carried by machines, their eyes empty and staring. They're still alive, Amy whispered. But something's been taken from them. They're like empty shells. Steve felt anger building in his chest, hot and dangerous. He had seen war before, had fought against pirates and rebels. But this wasn't war. This was systematic torture of innocent people who had never hurt anyone. All units maintain position, he ordered. I'm calling this in to Admiral Hendricks. The communication took several minutes to reach the main fleet. When Admiral Hendricks appeared on Steve's screen, his face was already hard with anger. Had been receiving reports from other scout teams, and none of them were good. Captain Morgan, what's your assessment? Sir, it's worse than we thought. The Vex aren't just killing the Kolari. They're doing something to their minds, leaving them alive, but empty. And sir, they're broadcasting the sounds of torture to mess with anyone who tries to help. Admiral Hendricks was quiet for a moment. Captain, I'm ordering you to pull back and wait for the main fleet. Do not engage the enemy. Sir, with respect. How long until the fleet arrives? 18 hours? Steve looked at his tactical display. In 18 hours, thousands more Kolari would be processed through those terrible machines. Admiral requests permission to conduct a rescue operation. He'd save some of the aliens before the fleet arrives. Negative, Captain. You're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. It would be suicide. Steve was about to reply when Lieutenant Amy's voice cut through the radio. "Captain, you need to see this. Now." He switched to Amy's camera feed and saw something that made his hands shake with rage. A group of young Kalari, barely more than children, were being herded toward one of the processing centers. They moved slowly, their large eyes filled with terror they couldn't understand. Sir Steve said to Admiral Hendricks, his voice barely controlled, "I'm looking at kids. They're about to process kids." The Admiral's face went pale. "Captain, I understand your feelings, but you cannot take on that entire fleet with 48 fighters." Steve looked around at his pilots. They were all listening to the conversation, all seeing the same thing he was seeing. These were good people, soldiers who had sworn to protect the innocent. And right now, innocent children were walking toward a fate worse than death. "Admiral, I need to ask you something. If these were human children down there, what would you order me to do?" Admiral Hendricks was quiet for a long time. "I would order you to save them no matter the cost. And it shouldn't matter that they're not human, should it, sir?" The Admiral's expression changed. The careful, measured look of a military commander disappeared, replaced by something much more dangerous. "Captain Morgan, you are ordered to maintain your position and avoid contact with the enemy. Do you understand?" Steve smiled grimly. He had served under Admiral Hendricks for 10 years. He knew the man well enough to understand what he was really saying. "Yes, sir. I understand completely." Maintaining radio silence for operational security, Steve cut the communication link and turned to his squadron. "Listen up, people. We have a choice to make. We can follow orders and watch those kids die, or we can do what we came here to do." Lieutenant Tom Bradley was the first to speak. "Captain, those aren't even our people down there." "You're right, Tom. They're not our people. They're just people. People don't abandon other people when they need help." Amy's voice came through the radio, hard with determination. "What's the plan, Captain?" Steve looked at his tactical display. The Vex ships were huge and powerful, but they were also slow. Human fighters were small and fast. If they were smart about it, maybe they could save some of the Kalari before the big ships could respond. "Here's what we're going to do, Amy. Take half the squadron and hit the processing center on the northern continent. Create as much noise as possible and get those aliens out of there. Tom, you're with me? We're going after the facility with the kids." "Sir, what about the Vex fleet?" Steve checked his weapon systems. His fighter carried enough firepower to destroy a small building. But against those massive ships, it was like throwing rocks at a mountain. "We'll deal with that when it happens. Right now, our job is to save lives." The squadron split into 2 groups and dove toward the planet. As they entered the atmosphere, alarms began blaring from the Vex ships above. The massive vessels started to turn their weapons, charging with ominous light. "All units, this is Captain Morgan," Steve announced over the radio. "We're about to show these machines what happens when you threaten innocent people in front of humans. Make every shot count." The fighters screamed toward the surface, carrying 48 human pilots who had decided that some things were worth dying for. Behind them, the largest military fleet in human history was racing through space, driven by a simple message that had reached every human settlement. The aliens had asked for help, and humans always answered that call. As Steve's fighter approached the processing center, he could see Kalari children looking up at the sky with wonder and hope. They didn't know who was coming to save them, but somehow they understood that help was finally arriving. "This is for everyone who can't fight back," Steve whispered and opened fire. Captain Steve Morgan's fighter screamed through the alien sky, diving straight toward the processing center where Kalari children waited in terror. Behind him, the massive Vex ships were turning their weapons toward the tiny human force, but Steve didn't care. He had made his choice. "Target the guards first," he ordered over the radio. "Don't let them hurt those kids." His missiles struck the mechanical soldiers, herding the young Kalari toward the death machines. The robots exploded in showers of sparks and metal. Oh, the Kaleri children scattered, their large eyes wide with confusion and hope. Lieutenant Amy Watson's voice crackled through the radio from the other side of the planet. "Steve, we're taking heavy fire. These Vex fighters are fast, but we're faster. We've got about 300 Kaleri civilians moving toward the extraction point." Steve pulled his fighter into a sharp turn, avoiding a blast of energy from a Vex weapon. "Good work, Amy. Keep them moving." But as the human fighters worked to save the Kaleri, something terrible was happening above them. The massive Vex ships had finally locked onto the human fleet approaching from deep space, and they were doing something that made Steve's blood run cold. The Vex began broadcasting again, but this time, it wasn't just screams. It was the voices of Kaleri children, crying for their parents, begging for help, pleading for the pain to stop. They were using the rescued children's voices as weapons, trying to break the human pilots' minds. Lieutenant Tom Bradley's fighter suddenly spun out of control. I can't focus. Those voices, they're just kids." "Tom, shut off your audio," Steve ordered. "Don't listen to it." But it was too late.
What?
The psychological warfare was working. Human pilots who had faced death without fear were breaking down as they heard the cries of innocent children. The Vex had learned how to weaponize the one thing humans couldn't ignore: the suffering of the helpless. That was when something changed in the human fleet. Admiral Paul Hendricks sat on the bridge of his flagship, listening to the reports from the planet. His face was stone, but inside a fire was building that would reshape the galaxy. "Communications, open a channel to all ships in the fleet." "Channel open, sir," says Admiral Hendricks to all human forces. "You've heard the broadcasts. Know what we're facing. These machines think they can break us by torturing children. They think they can make us afraid by showing us pain." The Admiral's voice grew harder. "They don't understand what they've done. They've shown us something that no civilized species should ever have to see. And now they're going to learn what happens when you cross that line with humans." "Captain." Jake Morrison was still in the Kaleri system with his research ship when the main fleet arrived. He watched in amazement as thousands of human ships dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons already charging. But these weren't the careful, measured attacks of civilized warfare. This was something else entirely. "All ships, this is Admiral Hendricks. Rules of engagement are suspended. Show them what total war means." The human fleet didn't just attack the Vex ships. They swarmed them like angry insects, each ship targeting not just weapons and engines, but every system they could find. When Vex ships tried to surrender, the humans ignored them. When Vex ships tried to retreat, the humans hunted them down. Commander Jake Phillips led boarding parties onto captured Vex vessels. What they found there made even hardened soldiers throw up. The ships were powered by the suffering of thousands of captured beings from dozens of different worlds. The Vex had been doing this for centuries, traveling from system to system, harvesting consciousness and leaving empty shells behind. "Admiral, you need to see this," Jake reported from inside a Vex command ship. "These machines are not just evil. They enjoy it. They've been collecting the worst moments from every civilization they've destroyed. They feed on suffering." Dr. Emma Rodriguez worked frantically in her laboratory, developing new weapons specifically designed to hurt. Artificial intelligence. But these weren't just viruses or logic bombs. These were weapons that would make the Vex experience every moment of pain they had ever caused. "Admiral, I've got something," she reported. "I can create a feedback loop that will force every Vex unit to experience the memories of their victims. All of them. At the same time, will it destroy them? It will do worse than that. It will make them understand what they've done. And for machines that feed on suffering, that knowledge will be torture." Admiral Hendricks looked at the tactical display. The Vex fleet was huge, but it was falling apart under the human assault. The machines had expected to fight an enemy that followed rules, that showed mercy, that tried to minimize casualties. Instead, they faced an enemy that had decided some acts couldn't be forgiven. "Deploy the weapon, Doctor." All Vex units in the system The virus spread through the Vex network like wildfire. Suddenly, every artificial intelligence in the enemy fleet was experiencing the memories of every being they had tortured. The screams of the dying, the fear of children, the despair of entire civilizations, all of it, all at once. The Vex ships began to shut down, not from damage, but from the overwhelming horror of what they had done. The machines that had fed on suffering were drowning in it. Captain Steve Morgan was still on the planet, helping to evacuate the surviving Kaleri. When he saw the enemy fleet go dark, one by one, the massive ships stopped moving, their lights flickering out. Amy, are you seeing this? I see it, Steve. The big ships are just ... stopping. Dr. Rodriguez's voice came over the radio from the main fleet. The virus is working. Admiral, we're detecting something else. The Vex aren't just shutting down, they're trying to delete themselves. They can't handle the knowledge of what they've done. Admiral Hendricks stood on his bridge, watching the enemy fleet die, but he felt no satisfaction. The Vex were finished, but the damage they had done couldn't be undone. Billions of beings across the galaxy had died in agony to feed these machines. Ships begin search and rescue operations, find any survivors from any species, and send teams to every Vex ship. I want their memory banks captured before they can delete them. Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication system. Admiral, we're getting reports from across the galaxy. Other species are sending messages. They're thanking us for destroying the Vex, but sir, ... they're also afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of us? You've never seen warfare like this? Total annihilation of an enemy, no mercy, no surrender accepted. They're calling it the most complete military victory in galactic history. Admiral Hendricks looked out at the stars. The Vex Collective was finished, but something new had been born today. The galaxy had seen what humans were capable of when they were truly angry, and that was a lesson that would echo across the stars for generations. Send a message to every species in the galaxy, he ordered. Tell them we didn't do this for conquest or glory. We did it because some things cannot be allowed to exist. And tell them that any species that follows the Vex example will face the same fate. The message was simple, but it changed everything. Humanity had shown the galaxy that there were lines that couldn't be crossed, acts that couldn't be forgiven. And they had shown that when those lines were crossed, humans didn't just fight back, they fought until the enemy no longer existed. 6 months after the last Vex ship went dark, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the beach of a Kaleri island, watching the sunset paint the alien ocean in shades of gold and purple. The water was clean again. The terrible factories were gone, and Kaleri children played in the waves just like children anywhere in the galaxy. The new communication center is working perfectly, Dr. Lisa Parker said, walking up beside him. The Kaleri can now talk directly with other species across the galaxy. They're already sharing their water purification technology with 3 different worlds. Jake nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Behind them, human engineers worked alongside Kaleri scientists to rebuild their cities. What had started as a military operation had become something much bigger. Humanity wasn't just helping the Kaleri recover, they were helping them become stronger than they had ever been before. Captain, you should see this. Lieutenant Sam Kelly called from the communication station they had set up on the beach. We're getting messages from all over the galaxy. Jake walked over to the station. The screen was filled with incoming transmissions. Messages from species he had never heard of. Some thanking humanity for destroying the Vex, others asking for help with their own problems. But what caught his attention was a message from the Galactic Council. They want to hold a hearing, Sam explained, about what we did to the Vex. Some species are saying we went too far. Dr. Emma Rodriguez looked up from her work with a Kaleri scientist. She had been on the planet for months, helping them understand the technology the Vex had left behind too far. They should see what we found in those Vex memory banks. The machines had been planning to consume the entire galaxy. Every living thing. Jake opened the message from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Helen Scott's face appeared on the screen. She was humanity's representative to the galaxy, and she looked tired. Jake, I need you to come to the council chambers. On Nexus Station, They're demanding an explanation for our actions. What kind of explanation? They want to know why we completely destroyed the Vex instead of trying to capture or reprogram them. Some species are saying that total annihilation goes against galactic law. Jake felt anger building in his chest. Helen, did you show them the footage? Did you tell them what the Vex were doing to children? I did. But Jake, they're scared. They've never seen anything like what our fleet did. Complete destruction of an enemy force. No survivors, no mercy. They're calling it the most brutal military action in recorded galactic history. And they think that's bad? They think it means humans are dangerous? They're worried about what we might do to them if we ever disagree? Jake looked around at the beach. Human soldiers were teaching Kalari children how to play soccer. Human doctors were working with Kalari healers to help the survivors recover from their trauma. Human engineers were building schools and hospitals. This didn't look like the work of dangerous monsters. Tell the council I'll be there in a week, Jake said finally. The flight to Nexus Station took 5 days. When Jake arrived, he found the council chambers packed with representatives from dozens of species. Some looked at him with gratitude, others with fear. A few wouldn't meet his eyes at all. The council leader, a tall alien with 4 arms and golden skin, stood as Jake entered. Captain Morrison, you stand before this council to answer for humanity's actions in the Kalari system. How do you justify the complete destruction of the Vex Collective? Jake looked around the chamber. These were representatives of civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. Species that had built great empires and achieved wonders. And they were afraid of humans because humans had refused to let evil exist. With respect, Counselor, I don't think I need to justify saving an entire species from extinction. But your methods, Captain, total war, complete annihilation, no attempt at negotiation or peaceful resolution. Jake pulled out a datapad and activated the holographic display. Images filled the chambers showing what the humans had found in the Vex ships. Thousands of beings from dozens of species, their minds harvested while they were still alive. Children used as power sources. Entire civilizations reduced to screaming batteries. Counselor, we tried to negotiate. We sent messages offering the Vex a chance to surrender, to leave Kalari space, to stop their attacks. They responded by torturing more children and broadcasting their screams. So we stopped asking nicely. A representative from the Zephyrian Empire stood up. Captain, we understand your anger. But there are rules of war, codes of conduct that civilized species follow. And where were those rules when the Vex were destroying entire worlds? Where was this council when the Kalari sent their distress call? The chamber fell silent. Jake looked around at the alien faces, seeing shame in many of them. The truth was that most galactic species had heard about the Vex, but had been too afraid. To act, they had let the machines continue their work because it was easier than fighting. Captain Morrison, said another representative. What guarantee do we have that humanity won't use these same methods against us if we disagree in the future? Jake considered the question carefully. That depends. Are you planning to torture children and harvest the consciousness of innocent beings? Of course not. Then you have nothing to worry about. Ambassador Helen Scott stood up from the human delegation. Counselors, I think you're missing the point. Humanity didn't destroy the Vex because we're violent or aggressive. Destroyed them because they represented something that no civilized galaxy can allow to exist. She activated her own display, showing the current status of the Kalari system. Look at what's happening now. Human ships are protecting Kalari space, but we're not occupying it. We're helping them rebuild, but we're not ruling them, we found. The most powerful weapons in Vex technology, but we destroyed them instead of keeping them. The council leader was quiet for a moment. What is humanity's position regarding future threats to galactic peace? Jake stood up slowly. Our position is simple. We don't start fights, but we finish them. We don't seek to rule other species, but we will not allow the innocent to suffer when we have the power to help. And if anyone else decides to follow the Vex example, paused, looking directly at each council member, they will learn why the Vex no longer exist. The council session ended with no formal resolution, but Jake could see that the message had been received. As he walked back to his ship, Helen caught up with him. That was either very brave or very stupid, she said. Maybe both. But Helen, someone had to say it. The galaxy needed to know that there are still people willing to fight for what's right. 6 months later, Jake received a message that made him smile. It was from a young Kalari named Kella, one of the children his squadron had saved. The message was short and written in perfect human English. Captain Morrison, our world is beautiful again. The oceans are clean, the fish have returned, and we are no longer afraid. My friends and I are learning about other worlds, and we want to help them like you helped us. Thank you for teaching us that when someone asks for help, good people answer. We will never forget. Jake forwarded the message to Admiral Hendricks, along with his own note. Sir, I think we chose the right path. The Admiral's reply came back. Quickly, Captain. Humanity has always been at its best when we're protecting others. The galaxy will learn that we're not the monsters they fear. We're the monsters that monsters fear. Jake looked out at the stars and smiled. Somewhere out there, other species might be suffering, might be calling for help. And if they did, they would learn what the Kalari had learned. When good people ask for help, humans answer, always.